Smoke lingered over the charred wagon like a mourning shroud. The woman lay motionless among scattered belongings, her skin ashen against the blackened earth. Miles from civilization, she had survived what her family could not, a ruthless raid. That left nothing but cinders and silence. Náshŭ approached cautiously, his horse's breath visible in the dawn chill. He had tracked raiders for days, only to find this lone survivor instead. His people and hers were enemies, yet something deeper than tribal boundaries stirred within him as he dismounted. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing a flicker of life that refused to surrender to death's shadows. Could mercy between supposed? Enemies change the course of hatred that had flowed through generations like a poisoned river? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The woman's eyelids fluttered closed again as Náshŭ knelt beside her. His calloused fingers found a pulse at her neck, weak but persistent. Like a dying ember that refused to be extinguished, he reached for the worn leather water skin hanging from his saddle. The hide container was decorated with symbols of rain and life, a gift from his mother before her passing. Náshŭ cradled the woman's head and pressed the opening to her cracked lips. At first, the water merely dribbled down her chin, but then instinct took over. She swallowed feebly, her throat working with effort. "Drink," he said in his own tongue, then tried the English word he had learned from traders. Water. Her eyes opened again, unfocused and clouded with pain. She stared up at him, confusion giving way to fear as recognition dawned. Apache, enemy. Her body tensed despite her weakness. "No hurt," Náshŭ said in broken English. "Help," she whispered. Something, her voice barely audible above the morning breeze. A name, perhaps Elizabeth, before unconsciousness claimed her. Once more, Náshŭ surveyed the destruction around them. The wagon's wooden frame had been reduced to charcoal. Personal belongings lay scattered, a child's doll, with singed hair, cookware blackened by flames, torn pages from a Bible fluttering in the breeze. Bodies, too. A man, presumably her husband, lay face down several yards away, his back riddled with arrows. Not Apache arrows, these were cruder, lacking the distinctive feathering of his people. Nearby, a smaller form beneath a singed blanket revealed the outline of a child. Náshŭ had been tracking a band of raiders for 3 days. Men who attacked both settlements and Apache camps alike, taking what they wanted and leaving. Death in their wake. Men who wore different faces, some white, some Mexican, some renegade Apache and Comanche united only by their greed and cruelty. The woman moaned, drawing his attention back. She would not survive another hour in the desert sun. The nearest white settlement was 2 days' ride, and they would likely shoot him on sight before he could explain his purpose. His own camp lay hidden in the canyon lands, a half-day's journey. To the east, the decision formed not in his mind, but in his heart. Náyamana, their medicine woman, would disapprove. The elders would question his judgment. But the woman had survived when all others had perished. Such determination deserved respect. Gently, Náshŭ lifted her. She was lighter than expected, hunger having already taken its toll during their journey west. He positioned her across his horse, then mounted behind her, one arm securing her limp form against his chest as they rode away from the destruction. Elizabeth's feverish mumbling painted fragments of the attack. They came at night. James tried to fight. Abigail was screaming. So many of them. Náshŭ understood enough English to piece together the story. Raiders had descended under cover of darkness. Her husband had resisted. Their child had died. She alone had somehow survived, perhaps overlooked as dead among the chaos. Midday sun beat down mercilessly as they traveled through arroyos and Náshŭ. passes known only to his people. The woman's skin burned with fever. Twice he stopped to give her water and wipe her brow with a dampened cloth. Each time her eyes opened briefly, confusion and fear giving way to a glimmer of recognition. "You're helping me," she whispered. During their second stop, Náshŭ Zio nodded. "I am Náshŭ Joe," he said, tapping his chest. "Elizabeth," she replied weakly, mirroring his gesture before consciousness slipped away again, got by late afternoon, the familiar rock formations that marked the hidden entrance to his people's canyon came into view. Náshŭ Joe sent the signal a hawk's cry, repeated twice alerting the sentries to his approach. As he guided his horse through the narrow passage, he felt Elizabeth stir against him. "Where?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Safe place," he answered. "My people." Her body tensed again, but she was too weak to resist. "Why me?" Náshŭ Joe considered his limited English, searching for words she would understand. "All people," he finally said, gesturing to encompass the vast sky above them. Under same sun, the hidden canyon unfolded before them like a secret garden carved from stone. Ancient cottonwoods marked the presence of water, their leaves shimmering gold in the late afternoon light. Elizabeth, drifting between consciousness and fevered dreams, barely registered the change in temperature as they entered the shadowed passage. Náshŭ Joe felt the familiar weight of stairs as they emerged into the main canyon. Children stopped their play. Women paused in their work. Warriors straightened, hands instinctively moving toward weapons. He had expected this reaction, yet the intensity of their scrutiny made him tighten his protective hold on Elizabeth. Náshŭ Joe returns with a white woman, someone called out in their language. An elder stepped forward, Máquia, respected for his wisdom. "You bring danger to our hidden place," he said without preamble. She was the only survivor. Náshŭ Joe replied, "The raiders we have been tracking destroyed her wagon and killed her family. And now you bring her here?" Máquia's voice remained calm, but disapproval edged each word. Before Náshŭ Joe could respond, a commanding voice cut through the growing murmurs. "Bring her to my lodge." The crowd parted to reveal Náhŭ, the tribe's medicine woman. Her face, etched with the lines of 8 decades, betrayed nothing of her thoughts. Náshŭ Joe dismounted carefully, lifting Elizabeth into his arms. Her head rolled against his shoulder, breath coming in shallow gasps. From within the folds of her torn dress, something fell to the ground. Náhŭ bent to retrieve it, a small leather pouch, similar to their own medicine bags. "What medicines does the white woman carry?" Náhŭ opened the drawstring and examined the contents with practiced eyes. "Interesting. She knows some plant lore." Inside Náhŭ's lodge, a small fire burned, filling the space with aromatic smoke. The old woman gestured to a bed of soft hides along the wall. "Place her there." As Náshŭ Joe laid Elizabeth down, she clutched weakly at his arm. "Don't leave," she whispered in English. "I stay," he replied, and explained to Náhŭ. "She fears being alone among us." The medicine woman snorted. "As well she should. Her people would do worse to one of us." Nevertheless, she moved with gentle efficiency, examining Elizabeth's injuries, dehydration, exhaustion, sunburns not severe. "The wound on her head concerns me most." Náshŭ Joe watched as Náhŭ opened her own medicine pouch, much larger and more elaborate than Elizabeth's. The bag, decorated with porcupine quills arranged in healing patterns, contained a lifetime of gathered knowledge. From it, she extracted dried herbs, powdered minerals, and small bundles of sacred plants. "Why did you bring her?" Náhŭ asked quietly as she worked, grinding herbs with a stone mortar. Náshŭ considered the question. "I saw something in her eyes, a strength. She fought to survive when many would have surrendered. There is strength in all living things that cling to life, Náshŭ replied, even scorpions and snakes. She is not a scorpion, Náshŭ said, nor am I her enemy. You are Apache. She is white. History has already decided your roles. Náshŭ mixed her medicine with water, then lifted Elizabeth's head to help her drink. Yet here you sit, defying that history. Elizabeth swallowed the bitter medicine, then opened her eyes. For a moment, clarity replaced confusion as she looked from Náshŭ to Náshŭ and back again. Thank you, she said simply, before exhaustion pulled her back into unconsciousness. She has manners at least, Náshŭ observed. Now we must wait. Tonight will determine if she lives or dies. As darkness fell, Náshŭ remained by Elizabeth's side while Náshŭ sang healing songs, her voice rising and falling like the wind through canyon walls. Outside, the council gathered to discuss the white woman's presence, but Náshŭ had made his choice. Whatever consequences came, he would face them. In her fevered state, Elizabeth reached out, her fingers, finding his. Náshŭ did not pull away. Dawn broke with the soft singing of Náshŭ, who had maintained her vigil through the night. Elizabeth's fever had broken shortly before sunrise, her skin no longer burning to the touch. Náshŭ, who had dozed sitting upright against the lodge wall, awoke to find Elizabeth watching him with clear eyes. You stayed, she said, her voice hoarse but stronger than before. He nodded. I promised. Náshŭ approached with a clay cup filled with water from the sacred spring, the lifeblood of their hidden community. The spring emerged from deep within. The canyon wall, water so pure, seemed to capture the sky's own color. For generations, his people had protected this place, its location known only to those of the tribe. Drink, Náshŭ instructed, supporting Elizabeth's head. This water has healed our people since time beyond memory. Elizabeth drank deeply, then looked at the old woman. Thank you for your kindness. Náshŭ's expression remained impassive. It is not kindness. It is our way to heal those who suffer, even when wisdom questions the decision. She rose stiffly. I must speak with the council. Náshŭ show her the spring. She should bathe her wounds in its waters. After Náshŭ departed, Náshŭ helped Elizabeth to her feet. She swayed slightly, one hand gripping his arm for support. My family, she said suddenly, as memory returned. They're all gone, aren't they? Yes, he answered simply. I am sorry. Grief flashed across her face, but she straightened with visible effort. I need to see this spring she mentioned. The path to the sacred spring required passing through the center of the Apache camp. Náshŭ walked slowly, matching his pace to Elizabeth's halting steps. Children stared openly, while adults made a show of continuing their tasks while casting sideways glances. One young boy ran up to Elizabeth, pointing and asking questions in rapid Apache, until his mother pulled him away with a stern word. They fear me, Elizabeth observed. They fear what your presence might bring. Náshŭ corrected. As your people would fear an Apache in their settlement. You're right, she acknowledged. I would have been afraid too before. She didn't complete the thought, but the implication hung between them. Before losing everything, before being saved by someone she'd been taught to fear, the sacred spring emerged from a narrow fissure in the red canyon wall, creating a small, crystal-clear pool before flowing into a series of smaller pools used for various purposes. Several elders sat near the uppermost pool, their conversation ceasing abruptly as Náshŭ and Elizabeth approached. The white woman comes to our sacred waters, one elder said disapprovingly. Náshŭ sent us, Náshŭ replied. Evenly, the healing must be completed. The elders exchanged glances, but moved aside. Elizabeth knelt at the pool's edge, staring at her reflection in the pristine water, a face she barely recognized, smudged with soot and marked by grief. Tentatively, she dipped her hands in the cool water, then splashed it over her face and neck. "It feels different," she murmured, "almost alive." "The spring is the heart of our people," Náshŭ explained. "We believe the Creator speaks through its waters." Elizabeth cupped her hands, lifting the water to examine it in sunlight. "It's beautiful." She turned to Náshŭ. "Thank you for bringing me here. Not just to this spring, but to your home. You risked much." Before he could respond, commotion arose from the main camp. A scout had returned, speaking urgently to the gathered warriors. Náshŭ tensed, listening. "What is it?" Elizabeth asked. "Riders. White men, searching the area where I found you." His expression darkened. "They follow your trail." Fear crossed Elizabeth's face, but not for herself. "They'll find this place because of me." "No," Náshŭ said with certainty. "I covered our path, but I must speak with the council." He hesitated. "Will you be safe here?" Elizabeth looked around at the wary faces of the elders, then back to the life-giving spring. "Yes," she said. "I think I am exactly where I need to be." 3 days passed. Elizabeth's strength returned gradually, like spring after a harsh winter. She was given a small shelter near the edge of the camp, close enough for protection, but distant enough to ease the tribe's discomfort. Each morning, Náhamana checked her wounds. Each evening, Náshŭ brought food and sat with her as. Twilight painted the canyon walls crimson. Communication remained their greatest challenge. Elizabeth knew a handful of Apache words gleaned from frontier talis, most of them terms for weapons or threats. Náshŭ's English consisted largely of trade terms and simple commands. Their conversations were a patchwork of words, gestures, and expressions that often led to confusion and occasionally unexpected laughter. On the fourth morning, Elizabeth retrieved a small, worn book from the pocket of her dress, the only possession she still carried from her former life. Its leather cover was stained with smoke, but the pages inside remained intact. Simple illustrations accompanied basic words, a primer meant for children. Náshŭ examined it with interest as Elizabeth opened it between them. "Book," she said, pointing to the object itself. "Book," he repeated, the unfamiliar word awkward on his tongue. She turned a page, pointing to a drawing of a tree. "Tree, tree," he echoed, then tapped the image and offered, "Gin." Elizabeth's face brightened. "Gin," she repeated carefully. And so it began, a daily exchange of words, building a bridge between worlds. She learned T for water, Shash for bear, Yadui for night. He learned sky, horse, friend. Children, initially shy, began to gather around during these lessons, giggling at the adults stumbling through each other's languages. They became the best teachers, without the reservations their parents carried. Kiona, a young woman who assisted Náhamana with healing, joined their sessions. Unlike many in the tribe, her curiosity outweighed her suspicion. Through pieced together conversations, Elizabeth learned that Kiona had once been taken by Mexican traders, but had escaped and returned to her people. The experience had left her with knowledge of Spanish and an understanding of captivity that created an unspoken bond between the women. "You work," Kiona said one afternoon, gesturing toward the women preparing hides and weaving baskets. "Learn our ways." Elizabeth nodded eagerly. Idleness had become its own form of torture, leaving too much time for grief to consume her thoughts. The women accepted her presence with reserved politeness, correcting her clumsy attempts at their crafts. With varying degrees of patience, Náshŭ watched from a distance as Elizabeth integrated herself into daily routines. She worked with determination, even when her hands blistered and her back ached. Each evening, she shared her observations with him, asking endless questions about Apache customs. "Your people lived here long?" she asked during one sunset conversation, gesturing to the canyon. "Many seasons," he replied. "Since my grandfather's grandfather." "My family came from Boston," she offered, though she knew the name meant nothing to him. "We traveled many months to reach the territory." Her expression darkened. "James, my husband, had a dream of land and cattle. Why leave your home?" The question was simple, but penetrated to the heart of her journey. Elizabeth stared into the small fire Náshŭ had built. "We sought something new, something ours." She looked up at the darkening sky. "James said we would build a legacy." Náshŭ followed her gaze to the emerging stars. "Legacy," he repeated, testing the word. Then, in his own language, he spoke of ancestors whose names lived in the stars, whose stories shaped his people's path. Though Elizabeth couldn't understand his words, something in his tone conveyed their meaning. For the first time since the attack, she felt the weight of isolation lift slightly. Different as they were, both understood the power of belonging, of continuity. "Tomorrow," Náshŭ said as he rose to leave, "I show you hunting." Elizabeth's eyes widened. "The others will allow this?" He smiled slightly. "They will, when they see you can help feed the children." Elizabeth woke to find Kiona standing at her shelter's entrance, holding a clay bowl filled with a pungent mixture. The young woman gestured for Elizabeth to sit up. "Medicine," Kiona explained, kneeling beside her, "for strength before hunting." The bowl was beautifully crafted, its surface etched with symbols of deer, mountain lions, and eagles as sacred hunters. Around its rim ran a continuous line representing the horizon where earth met sky. Elizabeth recognized the craftsmanship, having seen similar bowls used in Nahama's healing rituals. "It's beautiful," Elizabeth said, accepting the vessel with both hands as she'd seen others do. "My grandmother made," Kiona replied with pride. "Many seasons ago. Now I use for healing." The mixture inside smelled of sage, pine, and something earthy Elizabeth couldn't identify. She hesitated only briefly before drinking. The taste was bitter, but not unpleasant, warming her from within. "Good," Kiona nodded approvingly. "Now you ready for Náshŭ's teaching?" Outside, the camp was already active, despite the early hour. Women tended cooking fires, children carried water from the spring, and elders sat in the growing sunlight, their weathered hands busy with crafts. Elizabeth had begun to recognize the rhythms of their days, so different from the rigid schedules she'd known in Boston, or the exhausting labor of frontier life. Náshŭ waited at the edge of camp, a spare bow in hand. When he saw Elizabeth approaching, something shifted in his expression, a subtle softening she might have missed a week ago, before she'd learned to read the nuances of Apache communication. "You drank Kiona's medicine?" he asked. Elizabeth nodded. "It was strong." "Like you must be," he replied, offering the bow. "Today you learn to feed yourself." The morning passed in careful instruction. Náshŭ showed her how to hold the bow, how to nock an arrow, how to breathe before releasing. His hands occasionally guided hers, their momentary contact sending an unexpected warmth through her arms. Elizabeth found herself hyper-aware of his proximity, his scent of leather and open sky, the low timbre of his voice as he explained each movement. "Your people hunt?" he asked as she practiced drawing the bowstring. "The men do," she answered. "Women prepare what they bring home." Náshŭ considered this. "Our women hunt when needed. All must know survival." "My father taught me to shoot a rifle," Elizabeth offered. "My husband thought it improper, but I insisted. On the frontier, everyone should be able to defend themselves." Náshŭ's expression darkened. "The rifle did not save your family." The word stung, though she knew he hadn't meant cruelty. "No," she admitted quietly. We were unprepared for such violence. After a moment, she added, "Were they Apache? The raiders? Some, perhaps. Renegades who follow no tribal ways. Others were white men painted to look Apache, Mexicans, outcasts from many peoples." His jaw tightened. "They attack our camps, too. Take our children. Blame falls on all Apache, while true evil men go free." Elizabeth absorbed this perspective, one she'd never heard in settler communities, where Apache raid was a phrase that explained away all frontier violence. How many atrocities had been committed by men of her own race and blamed on his people? "I'm sorry," she said, the words inadequate but sincere. Náshŭ studied her face, then nodded once. "Try again," he said, gesturing toward their makeshift target. "This time, think of the arrow as part of yourself. Your eye, your arm, your will all one." Elizabeth drew the bow again, focusing on the center of the target. When she released, the arrow flew straighter than before, striking the outer edge. "Good," Náshŭ said, genuine approval in his voice. "You learn quickly." A small smile touched Elizabeth's lips, the first since the night her world had burned away. The sensation felt foreign, almost guilty. Yet as she notched another arrow, she realized something was shifting within her, like earth after winter thaw. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of it. "Again," she said, raising the bow. "I want to try again." A week of daily practice transformed Elizabeth's handling of the bow from awkward to competent. Her arms grew stronger, her aim more precise. Náshŭ was a patient teacher, his rare words of praise all the more valuable for their scarcity. Today would be different, her first actual hunt beyond the safety of the canyon walls. "Take this," Náshŭ said, presenting her with a hunting bow. Unlike the practice weapon, this bow was beautifully crafted, its limbs reinforced with sinew backing, its grip wrapped in soft leather that fit her hand as though made for her. "It's too fine," Elizabeth protested. "I'm still learning." "A good bow becomes part of the hunter," he replied. "This one belonged to my sister before sickness took her 2 winters ago. It has been waiting for new hands." The gift's significance wasn't lost on Elizabeth. She accepted with appropriate solemnity, running her fingers along the smooth wood. "I will honor it," she promised. 3 other hunters joined them: Kea, a warrior close to Náshŭ's age; Tarak, an older man with keen eyes; and Istis, a young woman not much older than 16. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to thinly veiled skepticism, as Náshŭ explained that Elizabeth would accompany them. "Can she move silently?" Kaya asked in Apache, which Elizabeth now partially understood. "Will she frighten away the deer with white woman's heavy steps?" "I can walk quietly," Elizabeth responded in halting Apache, surprising them. "And I will learn what I don't know." This earned her a respectful nod from Istis and a grunt of acknowledgement from Tarak. Kea remained dubious, but offered no further objection. They departed at dawn, moving through a hidden passage that wound away from a main canyon entrance. Elizabeth followed carefully, mimicking their movements, stepping where they stepped, freezing when they paused, matching her breathing to the natural rhythms around them. The terrain grew increasingly challenging as they ascended into the foothills. But Elizabeth's weeks of working alongside Apache women had strengthened her in ways her previous life never had docked near midday. Tarak spotted deer tracks. The hunting party spread out, communicating through hand signals Elizabeth had spent the previous evening memorizing. Náshŭ stayed closest to her, but she noted with satisfaction that he no longer hovered as though expecting her to. Fail. When Istis signaled a small herd ahead, everyone dropped into hunting stance. Elizabeth's heart pounded, not from exertion but anticipation. Náshŭ motioned for her to advance alongside him, while the others circled to position themselves downwind. "Remember," he whispered, breathe with the deer. When it exhales, release. Elizabeth nodded, notching an arrow as they crept forward. Through a screen of juniper, she spotted them, 3 does and a young buck, grazing in a small clearing. The wind favored them, carrying their scent away from the alert animals. Náshŭ raised his bow, and Elizabeth mirrored him, selecting the farthest doe as her target. She drew back, focusing on the animal's rhythmic breathing just as she'd been taught. When the doe exhaled, Elizabeth released. Her arrow struck true, piercing behind the front leg. The deer bolted, but staggered after several yards, collapsing as Náshŭ's arrow took down the buck. The remaining deer fled, one fall into Kaya's shot, while the other escaped into the brush. "Good shot, Náshŭ," said simply, but his eyes conveyed more than his words. As they approached the fallen animals, Elizabeth steeled herself. In Boston, meat had arrived neatly butchered. On the frontier, James had handled such tasks. Náshŭ handed her a knife, understanding in his expression. "The hunter honors the spirit by using all that is given," he explained. Elizabeth knelt beside the doe, murmuring a thank you as she'd seen Náshŭ do, and made the first cut. The others watched approvingly as she worked with unexpected competence, drawing on knowledge gleaned from frontier women who had shared preservation techniques during their journey west. "You have done this before," Tarek observed. "I have watched and learned," Elizabeth replied. "Different methods, same purpose." As they prepared the deer for transport, a distant sound froze them. All horses approaching. Many horses. "Down," Náshŭ commanded, pulling Elizabeth into the cover of a large boulder. From their hiding place, the hunting party watched. As mounted men crossed the ridge, a dozen riders, their mix of clothing suggesting the same band of raiders who had attacked Elizabeth's wagon. 2 Apache renegades rode among them, their tribal markings visible even at this distance. The sight sent a chill through Elizabeth, memories of that terrible night threatening to overwhelm her. Náshŭ's hand on her arm steadied her. "Still," he breathed, "they have not seen us." For tense minutes they remained motionless as the riders paused to water their horses at a stream below. Elizabeth could hear their rough laughter, the clink of stolen goods in their saddlebags. Among them, a man with a red bandana gestured toward the mountains where the hidden canyon lay. "They search for your people," she whispered to Náshŭ. He nodded grimly. "And for you, they leave no witnesses." When the raiders finally moved on, following a trail that would take them away from the hidden canyon, the hunting party gathered their kills and began a careful return journey. They traveled in silence, alert to any sound that might indicate the raiders had doubled back. By sunset, they had safely reached the canyon. Word of the raiders spread quickly, and by nightfall, the council fire burned high in the center of camp. Elizabeth had never been invited to tribal councils before, but Náshŭ insisted her presence was necessary. She sat slightly behind him as elders and warriors gathered around the sacred fire. The flames cast shifting shadows across solemn faces as Máquia, the eldest council member, opened the discussion. Elizabeth understood enough Apache now to follow the conversation, though Kiona sat beside her, occasionally translating complex concepts. "The raiders grow bolder," Tarek reported. "They travel openly, knowing the blue-coat soldiers will blame any violence on peaceful Apache. They seek our hidden water," another elder added. "The dry season approaches, and springs grow scarce." The council fire crackled, sparks spiraling upward like ascending spirits. This fire was more than mere warmth or light. It was the heart of tribal decisions, a sacred witness to their deliberations. Elizabeth found herself mesmerized by its dance, understanding now why such councils always gathered around flame. Máquia turned his weathered face toward Elizabeth. "The white woman brings this danger to our door," he said in deliberate English. "No," Náshŭ countered. "These raiders threatened us before she came." They attacked her people as they attack ours. Yet she lives among us now, Náshŭ observed. Winter approaches. What becomes of her when snow blocks the passes? The question hung in the air, giving voice to what many had wondered, but none had asked directly. Elizabeth felt the weight of every gaze upon her. "I can speak," she said, her Apache still imperfect but understandable. Rising to her feet, she continued, "I bring skills. I hunt. I work. I learn your ways. And when your people come searching," Máchia challenged, "will you reveal our hidden place?" The accusation stung, but Elizabeth understood its source. "My people died in that wagon," she replied quietly. "Those who live in settlements would not welcome me now, a woman who lives." Among Apache, Náshŭ stood beside her. Today she killed a deer with one shot. She speaks our words. She respects our ways. His voice remained level, but Elizabeth heard the undercurrent of emotion. "Judge her by her actions, not her skin. I have seen her healing hands," Kiona added unexpectedly. "She knows plants we do not. When Taney's child had fever, her remedy brought cool skin by morning." Discussions continued as night deepened, opinions divided. Some argued for sending Elizabeth to the nearest settlement when weather permitted. Others acknowledged her growing contribution to tribal life. Through it all, the council fire burned steadily. Witness to this unprecedented debate, finally, Máchia raised his hand for silence. "The white woman may remain until the first snow," he decreed. "Then we will decide again." As the council dispersed, Elizabeth felt both relief and uncertainty. First snow could arrive within weeks or months in these mountains. Her future remained as shifting as the flames that now burned low in the sacred circle. "It is more time," Náshŭ said quietly, as they walked back toward her shelter. "Time to show them who you truly are." Autumn painted the canyon with golden light as days grew shorter. Elizabeth's place in the tribe shifted subtly following the council's decision. No longer merely tolerated, she was now expected to contribute fully. The women invited her to join their gathering expeditions, where she learned to identify desert plants with medicinal properties. In return, she shared frontier remedies her grandmother had taught her, creating a fusion of healing traditions. That intrigued even Náshŭ. One evening, as several women worked on crafts around a small fire, Kiona's grandmother, Thalluta, approached Elizabeth with a wooden box containing colorful glass beads treasures obtained through trade with Mexican merchants. "You learn," the old woman stated, sitting beside her and removing a partially completed necklace from the box. The beadwork formed intricate patterns of blue, white, and black against a buckskin backing. Tiny shells and bits of polished stone were woven among the glass beads, catching firelight with each movement. Elizabeth accepted the necklace reverently. "It's beautiful." Thalluta demonstrated the beading technique, her gnarled fingers still, nimble despite their age. Elizabeth watched intently, then attempted to continue the pattern. Her first efforts were clumsy, earning a disapproving click from Thalluta, who adjusted Elizabeth's hands to show the proper tension. As days passed, Elizabeth's beadwork improved. The repetitive motion became meditative, allowing her mind to process grief while her hands created beauty. Sometimes, working alongside the women, she would suddenly remember Abigail, her daughter who had not survived the raid. The pain would steal her breath momentarily, but the presence of the women around her, their quiet acceptance and shared work, somehow made the burden easier to bear. One afternoon, Náshŭ found Elizabeth sitting alone near the spring, finishing the necklace. The pattern she had created blended traditional Apache designs with motifs from her own cultural background, geometric shapes flowing into stylized roses, her daughter's favorite flower. "You make beauty from memory," he observed, sitting beside her. Elizabeth nodded, surprised by his perception. "Each pattern tells a story," she said, echoing what Talyuda had taught her. This is my story now, not only what I lost, but what I found. Náshŭ was silent for a moment, watching her hands work. Your husband, he finally asked, was he a good man? The question startled her, but Elizabeth considered it honestly. James was ambitious and hardworking, she replied. Not always gentle, but he believed he was building something better for our family. After a pause, she added, he would not have understood this place or your people. He saw the frontier as empty land waiting for his plow. And you? What do you see now? Elizabeth set down the beadwork. I see that I was blind before. This land has never been empty. It's filled with life, history, meaning I never understood. She looked at him directly. Your people were here long before mine arrived claiming discovery. Something shifted in Náshŭ's expression, a subtle softening around his eyes. Not all white eyes would say this. I have seen both worlds now, Elizabeth replied. I cannot unsee what I have learned. In the weeks that followed, Elizabeth's integration into tribal life accelerated. She taught the women to make soap using techniques from the East, adapted to desert plants. She showed them how to preserve meat in ways that complemented their traditional methods. The children delighted in the simple games she remembered from her own childhood, while she learned their games of skill and strategy. Náshŭ often observed these exchanges, his presence a constant in Elizabeth's new life. Though his duties as scout frequently took him from camp, he always sought her out upon returning. Their conversations deepened as language barriers diminished, revealing shared values despite their different backgrounds. Winter comes soon, he remarked one evening as they watched stars emerge above the canyon walls. The first frost had already touched the highlands, a harbinger of snow to follow. Elizabeth's fingers found the beaded necklace she now wore. I know, she replied simply, the council's deadline unspoken between them. Dawn had barely touched the canyon rim when Elizabeth woke to urgent voices. Outside her shelter, people moved with purpose, warriors gathering weapons while women hastily packed essential items. Náshŭ appeared at her doorway, his expression grave. Raiders, he said without preamble. A scout spotted them approaching the hidden entrance. Elizabeth felt her blood run cold. How many? 20, perhaps more. Too many. His eyes held hers. They have a captive who knows our canyon. They tortured the location from him. She rose quickly, gathering her few possessions. What can I do? Help the children and elders. There is a higher path, difficult, but hidden. Kiona will guide you. And you? Elizabeth asked, though she already knew the answer. We will delay them, give you time to reach safety. Fear rose in her throat, not for herself, but for him. Before she could speak, a young warrior rushed up to them. Náshŭ, they come faster than expected. We must sound the warning. Near the center of camp stood a sacred drum, used only in ceremonies and emergencies. Its deep voice could carry throughout the canyon, alerting even those at the farthest springs. The warrior turned toward it, but Náshŭ caught his arm. Not yet. First, we must be sure the escape path is clear. Elizabeth saw the dilemma instantly. The drum would alert everyone, but also tell the raiders they had been discovered. Timing was crucial. A commotion at the canyon entrance made the decision for them. Shots rang out, followed by war cries. The raiders had found them. The drum! Náshŭ ordered, pushing the young warrior toward it. Elizabeth ran with them. As they reached the ceremonial area, a horseman burst into view, a rider in a red bandana, leading several others. Elizabeth froze. She recognized him instantly, the same man she had glimpsed from hiding during the hunting expedition. The same voice she had heard giving orders the night her family died. There, she cried, pointing toward the approaching raiders. The one in red, he led the attack on my wagon. The young warrior reached for the drumsticks, but an arrow struck his shoulder before he could sound the alarm. He fell, crying out in pain. Without hesitation, Elizabeth grabbed the fallen sticks and struck the drum with all her strength. The deep, resonant boom echoed off canyon walls, followed by another and another as she established the rhythm for danger. Throughout the camp, people responded immediately to the warning drum. Children were gathered, elders helped to their feet, warriors moved to defensive positions. Elizabeth continued drumming until Náshŭ pulled her away. "You must go now," he insisted. "Join Kiona with the others." "I can fight," Elizabeth protested. "I can use a bow. Please." The word was unlike him, almost a plea. "I cannot focus if I fear for you." The admission struck her deeply. Before she could respond, more raiders appeared. Náshŭ pushed her behind him, drawing his knife as 3 men approached. Elizabeth backed away, searching for a weapon. Her hand found a fallen warrior's bow. The raider in the red bandana spotted her, and recognition flashed in his eyes. "The woman from the wagon," he shouted. "Thought we got all of you." He raised his rifle, but Elizabeth was faster. The bow felt like an extension of herself as she drew and fired in one fluid motion, just as Náshŭ had taught her. Her arrow found its mark in the raider's shoulder, causing him to drop his weapon with a howl of pain. The battle swirled around them, Apache warriors engaging the raiders with silent efficiency. Elizabeth found herself fighting alongside those who had once been strangers, now her defenders. When a raider cornered Talyuta, Elizabeth's second arrow protected the old woman who had taught her beadwork. Through the chaos, she caught glimpses of Náshŭ moving like a shadow, deadly and precise. Together with the other warriors, they drove the raiders back toward the canyon entrance, where more Apache fighters had set an ambush. By midday, it was over. 7 raiders lay dead, the rest fled, several wounded. The tribe had suffered losses: 2-3 warriors killed, several more injured, including the young man who had tried to sound the warning drum. In the days following the raid, the tribe buried their dead with solemn ceremonies that Elizabeth observed from a respectful distance. The wounded recovered under NáhÄmana's care, assisted by both Kiona and Elizabeth, whose combined knowledge saved the young warrior who had tried to sound the warning drum. The raid changed Elizabeth's status in ways no council decision could have. She had fought to protect the tribe, had warned them of danger, had shed blood alongside Apache defenders. Even Makia acknowledged her contribution, presenting her with a decorated knife taken from one of the fallen raiders, both practical tool and symbol of warrior status. One crisp morning, as frost rimmed the spring water, Kiona approached Elizabeth with a bundle wrapped in soft hide. "For winter," she explained, unwrapping the package to reveal exquisitely crafted moccasins lined with rabbit fur. The footwear was essential for the coming season, when snow would make Elizabeth's worn settler boots impractical. "My mother and I made them for you." Elizabeth accepted the gift with appropriate ceremony, recognizing it as more than practical footwear. These weren't temporary accommodations for a guest, but preparations for someone expected to remain through. "Winter, they're beautiful," she said, noting the subtle beadwork that matched her necklace pattern. "Thank you for this kindness." "Not kindness," Kiona replied with unexpected seriousness. "Family duty." The implications of this statement lingered as Elizabeth tried on the moccasins. They fit perfectly, the softened hide conforming to her feet, as though she had always worn such footwear. Walking back to her shelter, she marveled at the sensation connected to the earth in a new way, each step silent and sure. Náshŭ found her later gathering kindling for the communal fires. Since the raid, something had shifted between them, an unspoken awareness that neither seemed ready to address directly. "You walk like Apache now," he observed, nodding toward her moccasins. Kiona and her mother made them, Elizabeth explained. For winter, you wish to stay through snow season? The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Elizabeth set down her bundle of kindling and faced him directly. I have nowhere else to go, she said. And even if I did, I'm not sure I would leave. Náshŭ. Expression remained carefully neutral. The council's decision stands. When first snow falls, they will decide again. And what do you think they will decide? He studied her face before answering. Some still fear your presence brings danger. The raid proved they were not wrong. The raiders would have come regardless, Elizabeth countered. They were searching for your water, your canyon. I helped sound the warning. Yes, he acknowledged. This is why others now speak for you to stay. After a pause, he added quietly, as do I. Before Elizabeth could respond, a scout arrived with urgent news. Náshŭ listened intently, his expression darkening. What is it? Elizabeth asked, when they were alone again. The raiders who escaped, they have joined with others. A larger force gathers in the valley. His jaw tightened, and they had soldiers with them. Soldiers? From the fort? Yes, the bluecoats claim to hunt hostile Apache, but they ride with known raiders. Bitterness edged his voice. The same men who attack both your people and mine are called allies by your government. Elizabeth felt sick at the implication. These soldiers, they're not following orders. They must be corrupt, working with the raiders for profit. Perhaps Náshŭ conceded. But when Apache defend themselves, all White Sea is violence. They do not ask who truly started the bloodshed. That evening, Náshŭ asked Elizabeth to join him on a scouting mission. This unprecedented invitation raised eyebrows among the warriors, but none objected openly. They departed before dawn, traveling high into the foothills where vantage points allowed them to survey the surrounding territory. From a rocky outcrop, they spotted the encampment, a disturbing alliance of raiders and uniformed soldiers. Elizabeth counted nearly 40 men, far more than the tribe could hope to defeat in direct conflict. We cannot fight so many, she whispered. No, Náshŭ agreed, but winter comes. Soon these passes will be blocked with snow. As if summoned by his words, the first snowflakes began to fall, delicate crystals drifting down from a steel-gray sky. Elizabeth extended her hand, watching as the tiny stars melted against her skin. First snow, she murmured, remembering the council's decree. Her future would be decided now. Snow continued to fall as Elizabeth and Náshŭ made their way back to the canyon, covering their tracks and transforming the landscape into an unfamiliar wonderland. They took shelter in a small cave when the storm intensified, building a fire well back from the entrance to avoid detection. The close confines created an intimacy they had not experienced before. As darkness settled outside, Náshŭ unwrapped a high bundle containing dried meat, berries, and a small leather pouch. From this pouch, he withdrew what looked like a flat piece of bone or ivory, etched with intricate markings. What is it? Elizabeth asked, leaning closer to examine the object in the firelight. Star map, he explained. My father made it for navigating when clouds hide the sky. He traced the patterns with his finger. Each mark shows where important stars should be, their paths through seasons. Elizabeth studied the map with fascination. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, the astronomical knowledge precise. She recognized configurations similar to constellations. She knew the Great Bear, the Hunter, alongside patterns unfamiliar to her. Your people know the stars well, she observed. The stars guide our hunts, our ceremonies, our stories. Náshŭ, voice softened as he pointed to a particular constellation. This one is Changing Woman, who taught us to live in harmony with Earth's cycles. As the fire crackled between them, their conversation deepened. Perhaps it was the isolation, the falling snow cutting them off from the world. Or perhaps it was the first snow deadline hanging over them. Whatever the reason, walls began to crumble. Tell me about Boston, Náshŭ requested. The place you came from. Elizabeth described her childhood home, cobblestone streets, tall ships in the harbor, church bells on Sunday mornings. She spoke of her father, a printer whose shop smelled of ink and paper, and her mother, who had taught her herbs and remedies passed down through generations of women. "Why did you leave this place?" he asked, Elizabeth's gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "My parents died of fever when I was 19. I had no brothers or sisters, no inheritance beyond a few books and my mother's recipes." She paused, memories surfacing that she had long kept buried. "I married James because he offered security, a future. He was older, established in his business. When he decided to seek land in the West, I had little choice but to follow." "You did not love him?" The directness of the question startled her, but in this moment of truth, prevarication seemed pointless. "I respected him. We shared a child together, my Abigail." Her voice caught on the name. "Love? Perhaps not as stories describe it. We were partners in a venture, building a life." Náshŭ was silent for a long moment. "My people believe matches should be made from heart-knowing, not just practical need." "And you?" Elizabeth found herself asking. "Have you known this heart-knowing?" He poked at the fire, sending sparks upward. "Once. She was from another band of Apache. We met at a gathering of tribes." A shadow crossed his face. "Soldiers came. Many died. She was among them." "I'm sorry," Elizabeth said softly. "It was many seasons ago." His eyes met hers across the flames. Life continues. New paths open. The implication hung in the air between them, neither willing to be first to acknowledge it directly. Instead, Náshŭ shifted the conversation. "My name, do you know what it means?" Elizabeth shook her head. "He who sees the hidden." He translated. "Given after my first vision quest, when I found water beneath dry earth that saved our people during drought." "It suits you," she said. "You found me when I was hidden among ashes, barely alive. Perhaps I was meant to find you." He suggested, voice low. "Perhaps your path and mine were drawn together by forces beyond our understanding." Elizabeth felt a strange certainty settle over her. "I believe they were," she admitted. "Everything that happened, even the terrible parts, led me here, to this canyon, to your people." She hesitated, then added softly, "To you." Náshŭ reached across the space between them, his hand finding hers. No words were needed as their fingers intertwined, warm against the cold night. Outside, snow continued to fall. The first snow that would decide Elizabeth's fate when they returned to the tribe. But in her heart, Elizabeth knew her decision was already made. They returned to the canyon the following day, moving carefully through snow-laden passes. The transformation of the landscape mirrored the change between them. Familiar territory made new, boundaries softened and redefined. Though they spoke little during the journey, their shared glances carried the weight of their fireside confessions. The tribe welcomed their return with evident relief. Elizabeth immediately noticed preparations for a council meeting central. Fire built higher than usual, elders gathering with solemn expressions. The first snow had come, and with it, the time for decision. As twilight settled over the canyon, Kiona approached Elizabeth's shelter. "Come," she said, "prepare for council." In Kiona's lodge, Elizabeth found several women waiting. Taluda held a garment of soft white buckskin, elaborately decorated with beadwork and quills. The dress was clearly ceremonial, its craftsmanship extraordinary. "For you," Kiona explained, "to wear before council." Elizabeth touched the dress with reverence. "It's too fine. I cannot accept such a gift." "Not gift," Taluda stated firmly. Necessary. Council must see you as woman of standing. Understanding. Donned. This was no mere clothing, but a statement of identity. If she appeared before the council in this traditional garment, she would be presenting herself as one who sought to belong to the tribe permanently. As the women helped her dress, Elizabeth realized how much her body had changed in these months. The softness of city life had been replaced by the lean strength of one who hunted, gathered, and worked alongside Apache women. The dress fit as though made for her, which she realized it likely had been the women preparing for this moment, even as Elizabeth herself had been uncertain. "Your hair," Kiona said, unbraiding Elizabeth's customary style. With deft fingers, she reworked the light brown strands into a traditional Apache arrangement, weaving in strands of beads and a single eagle feather. When they had finished, Náshŭ handed Elizabeth a small polished stone to use as a mirror. The woman who looked back was neither fully white nor Apache, but something new, a bridge between worlds. Her transformation was not merely external. It reflected the internal journey of these past months. "You are ready," Náshŭ declared. The council fire burned bright against the darkening sky as Elizabeth approached, flanked by Kiona and Náshŭ. Conversations hushed at her appearance. She felt the weight of every gaze, some approving, others still wary, all assessing. Máquia opened the proceedings with a recitation of tribal law regarding outsiders. Though Elizabeth now understood most Apache words, Náshŭ translated the formal language to ensure complete comprehension. "The first snow has come," Máquia concluded. "As agreed, we must decide if the white woman Elizabeth remains or departs." Náshŭ sat among the warriors, his expression carefully neutral despite the previous night's intimacy. This was tribal. Business and personal feelings must not appear to influence the proceedings. Elizabeth stepped forward when beckoned. "I stand before you to request permission to remain with the people," she said in Apache, the formal phrases carefully memorized. "I offer my skills, my loyalty, and my life to the tribe's welfare." Máquia nodded acknowledgement of her words. "You have learned our language well, but language alone does not make one Apache. I have also learned to hunt, to gather, to heal using your ways," Elizabeth responded. "I fought beside your warriors when raiders attacked. I seek to continue learning, to be of value to the people who saved me when all was lost." Various tribal members rose to speak, some in her favor, recounting instances where her skills had benefited the community. Others expressed concerns about divided loyalties should conflict with white settlers escalate. Náshŭ, whose initial skepticism had gradually given way to grudging respect, offered a measured assessment. "She has proven useful. Her knowledge of white ways may serve us in dangerous times ahead." With a significant look at Náshŭ, she added, "and some hearts would break should she leave." Murmurs rippled through the gathering at this acknowledgement of what many had observed developing between Elizabeth and Náshŭ. Finally, Máquia rose again. Before final decision, there must be proof of commitment. His stern gaze fixed on Elizabeth. "You must undergo sunrise trial alone in sacred cave for 1 day and night, seeking vision of your true path." Gasps arose from several present. The trial was typically reserved for Apache youth transitioning to adulthood or warriors seeking spiritual guidance before important decisions. "She is not Apache," someone objected. "The spirits may not speak to her." "That," Máquia replied, "is precisely what we shall learn." Dawn painted the eastern sky with pale fire as Elizabeth was led to the sacred cave. Náshŭ walked beside her, explaining the trial in hushed tones. "You will remain alone until tomorrow's sunrise. No food, little water." The old woman handed her a small clay cup. "Drink when thirst becomes too great, but understand visions come easier to the empty vessel." The cave entrance stood halfway up the canyon wall, accessible only by a narrow path that wound between jagged rocks. Inside, a small chamber opened into darkness, its walls adorned with ancient paintings, handprints, animal figures, and symbols whose meanings had faded with time. At its center lay a circle of stones, worn smooth by generations of seekers who had sat in contemplation before her. "This place is old," Náshŭ said, gesturing to the paintings. "Our ancestors sought wisdom here when the world was young. The boundary between worlds grows thin within these walls." Before departing, Náshŭ lit a small bundle of herbs. The pungent smoke filled the chamber, clearing it of ordinary thoughts, as surely as it cleared the air of ordinary sense. "Remember," she added at the entrance, "the trial is not about enduring discomfort. It is about listening when the spirits speak." Then Elizabeth was alone. She settled into the stone circle, folding her legs beneath her as she had seen tribal members do during ceremonies. The white buckskin dress gleamed softly in the dim light filtering through the entrance. Outside, snow continued to fall, the silence broken only by the occasional whisper of wind. Hours passed. Elizabeth fought against her practical mind's inclination to measure time, to count heartbeats, to resist the purposeful emptiness the trial demanded. She thought of her former life, the structured days in Boston, the rigid expectations of frontier settlements, and realized how those rhythms had always filled her hours, leaving no space for deeper listening. As daylight faded, the cave darkened. Cold seeped from stone walls. Elizabeth wrapped her arms around herself, breathing deeply to generate warmth. Hunger gnawed at her belly, but she welcomed the sensation as part of the experience. Only once did she sip from the clay cup, the water tasting sweeter than any. She had known. Night deepened. Without the distraction of sight, her other senses heightened. She could hear the crystalline sound of snowflakes landing outside, smell the lingering herb smoke mingling with ancient dust, feel the subtle vibrations of the living mountain around her. In this heightened state, boundaries blurred. Elizabeth found herself remembering Abigail with a clarity that was almost presence, not with the sharp pain of loss, but with a sense of connection that transcended death. She felt James too, acknowledging his journey had ended, but recognizing that his drive had brought her to this transformative place. Images flowed through her mind, not quite visions, but more than memories. She saw the wagon burning, but now perceived it as necessary destruction, clearing the way for new growth. She saw Náshŭ finding her among the ashes, recognized now as an act of fate rather than chance. Most powerfully, she experienced the canyon community as an intricate web of relationships, each person connected to others, to ancestors, to the land itself. In this web, she perceived her own thread, initially foreign, but increasingly woven into the pattern. The realization brought tears that flowed freely down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered to the darkness. When morning light finally penetrated the cave entrance, Elizabeth emerged transformed. Though physically weakened by hunger and cold, her spirit felt clearer and stronger than ever before. Náshŭ waited outside, nodding with approval at what she saw in Elizabeth's eyes. "You have listened," the old woman observed. "Yes," Elizabeth replied simply. The tribe had gathered at the council fire, anticipating her return. Elizabeth walked among them with quiet dignity, conscious of her disheveled appearance, but unconcerned by it. What mattered now lay beneath the surface, in the certainty that had crystallized during her night of contemplation. Náshŭ studied her carefully as she stood before the council. "What did you learn in the sacred place?" he asked. Elizabeth considered her words carefully, knowing they would determine her fate. "I learned that life is not a straight path, but a web of connections," she began. "I learned that what we call death is merely transformation. I learned that my old self had to burn away for my new self to emerge." She paused, then added with quiet certainty, "And I learned that I am already home." A murmur passed through the gathering. Even Makia's stern expression softened slightly. The spirits have spoken to her, Náshŭ declared, her authority as medicine woman lending weight to the pronouncement. They would not speak to one who does not belong. Snow transformed the canyon into a realm of hushed beauty. Drifts softened the angular rock formations, while ice crystals formed delicate sculptures along the spring's edge. The tribe settled into winter rhythms, mending tools and clothing, telling stories around evening fires, conserving resources carefully preserved during autumn's abundance. Following the trial and council's acceptance, Elizabeth moved from her isolated shelter to a more permanent lodge near the center of the community. Women brought housewarming gifts, a cooking pot, woven baskets, cured hides for additional warmth. Children no longer shied away, but sought her out, delighting in the different stories and games she shared. Most evenings, Náshŭ visited her lodge. Their relationship, acknowledged but not yet formalized, blossomed in the extended intimacy winter provided. They spoke of their pasts without reservation now, sharing dreams and fears alike. Elizabeth learned of his childhood, his training as a scout, his hopes for his people's future. He absorbed her stories of Boston, her journey west, her gradual disillusionment with the frontier's broken promises. One night, as snow fell heavily outside, Náshŭ arrived carrying a carefully wrapped bundle. The tribe had been preparing for the winter solstice ceremony, a time of reflection when the sun's path began its return journey. "For you," he said, placing the bundle in her hands. Elizabeth unwrapped it slowly, revealing a blanket unlike any she had seen. Its base was tightly woven wool in deep indigo, but embedded within the weave were patterns created from both Apache, symbols and motifs she recognized from her former life roses, like those she had beaded into her necklace. Stars arranged in constellations from both their traditions. "A wedding blanket," he explained, his usually steady voice carrying a note of uncertainty. "If you would join your path with mine." Elizabeth ran her fingers over the intricate patterns, recognizing the countless hours of work, the thought behind each symbol. "Who made this?" she asked softly. "Many hands. Taluta designed the pattern. Kiona and others helped with the weaving." He paused. "They began after your trial, knowing my heart's intention." The blanket represented more than a proposal. It symbolized the tribe's acceptance of their union, their blessing of this unprecedented joining of worlds. Elizabeth felt tears warm her eyes as she looked up at him. "Yes," she said simply, "my path is with yours." Their marriage ceremony took place during the solstice celebrations. Elizabeth wore the white buckskin dress again, now adorned with additional beadwork she had crafted herself. Náshŭ appeared in ceremonial attire, buckskin leggings, a chest plate of polished bone beads, eagle feathers in his hair, denoting his status as a respected warrior. Makia conducted the ritual, binding their hands with a braided cord, made from both their contribution strands, from Elizabeth's original dress, woven with leather, from Náshŭ's first hunting bow. They shared water from the sacred spring, exchanged vows in both languages, and were wrapped together in the wedding blanket while the tribe sang blessing songs. That night, as husband and wife, they held each other beneath the wedding blanket in Elizabeth's lodge, now their shared home. "I never imagined this path," she whispered against his chest. "The Creator's design is beyond our seeing," he replied, stroking her hair. "But this joining feels written in the stars long before we met." Winter deepened, sealing the canyon from outside threats. Snow blocked the passes that raiders might use, creating a season of relative peace. Elizabeth and Náshŭ settled into married life, their days filled with community work, their nights with the private discovery of each other. Yet even in this idyllic time, concerns for the future surfaced. Scouts reported increased military presence in the territory once spring arrived. Traders who occasionally braved winter paths brought news of escalating tensions between settlers and tribes throughout the region. One evening, as tribal leaders gathered to discuss spring preparations, a trusted Navajo trader arrived with disturbing information. "The raiders you fought have allied with corrupt cavalry officers," he reported. "They claim all Apache are hostile, using attacks on settlements as excuse for their own raids. They seek the hidden canyons, the water sources. When snow melts, they will come in greater numbers." Elizabeth listened with growing concern. The life she had found, the community that had embraced her, faced existential threat from those who should be upholding justice. Her unique position, understanding both worlds, suddenly seemed not just personal transformation, but potential salvation. "I may be able to help," she said, speaking carefully. "There are honest settlers who have also suffered from these raiders. Perhaps together we could stand against the true enemies." Náshŭ took her hand, understanding her meaning immediately. "A dangerous path," he cautioned. "But perhaps the only one," she replied. Spring's first whispers brought both renewal and anxiety to the canyon. As snow melted from the lower passes, scouts reported increased activity in the valley below. The Raider Military Alliance had established a base camp near the territorial road, positioning themselves to control trade. And movement throughout the region. After lengthy council deliberations, a bold plan emerged. Elizabeth and Náshŭ would travel to neighboring Apache bands and to select settler communities, seeking allies against the common threat. Elizabeth's unique position, a white woman who had become Apache by marriage and adoption, made her an ideal emissary between worlds typically separated by suspicion and violence. Before departing, Náyamana presented them with a sacred object central to diplomatic missions, a ceremonial pipe carved from red stone, its stem decorated with eagle feathers and porcupine quills. The bowl depicted two hands clasped in friendship, a powerful symbol of peaceful intention. "This pipe has witnessed many treaties," Náyamana explained, "some honored, some broken. Its smoke carries words to the Creator, who witnesses all promises made between peoples." Their first journey took them to a neighboring band of Mescalero Apache, distant cousins to Náshŭ's people. Initial suspicion at Elizabeth's presence gave way to curiosity as she addressed them in their own language, demonstrating respect for their customs. When Náshŭ presented the peace pipe, their chief, Náshŭ, listened carefully to their proposal. "These raiders have stolen our horses and attacked our hunting parties," Náshŭ acknowledged. "But how can we trust white settlers as allies when their kind have broken every treaty?" "Not all settlers are the same," Elizabeth replied. "Many are victims themselves, seeking only to farm in peace. The raiders attack them too, often disguised as Apache, to turn sentiment against all tribes." After thoughtful consideration, Náshŭ agreed to send warriors if other alliances could be secured. But, he warned, "we will watch carefully to ensure we are not betrayed again." Their next challenge proved more daunting, approaching settler communities. Elizabeth suggested starting with a family she had known briefly during her journey west, homesteaders who had shown unusual respect toward native peoples. The Morgan family's small ranch lay tucked against the foothills, deliberately distant from larger settlements. Thomas Morgan, a grizzled former trapper who had married a Mexican woman named Lucia, had created a life that borrowed from multiple traditions. Their surprise at seeing Elizabeth, presumed dead after the wagon attack, quickly turned to amazement. "At her story, you married an Apache?" Thomas asked, studying Náshŭ with cautious respect. "I found a new life," Elizabeth replied simply. "And now we seek to protect it, to protect all who wish to live peacefully in this territory." Over a shared meal, Elizabeth and Náshŭ explained the situation, the raiders masquerading as various groups to sow discord, the corrupt military officers profiting from chaos, the threat to all who valued honest living over violence. "We've suspected something like this," Lucia confirmed. "3 families from the valley have been attacked this winter. Military patrols arrived too. Late, always blaming Apache raids. Yet we've seen these so-called raiders wearing mismatched gear that no true Apache would wear." Thomas nodded grimly. "There are others who question the official story. The Petersons lost their youngest son in an attack last month. The Wilsons had their entire corn harvest stolen. Even the trading post owner, Schmidt, has spoken against. These so-called patrols that demand protection payments, will they listen to us?" Elizabeth asked. "They'll listen to me," Thomas replied. "And seeing you, a woman they believed killed by Apache, now married to one and advocating peace, that will open minds, if nothing else." Over the following weeks, Elizabeth and Náshŭ created an unprecedented alliance. The peace pipe was smoked in settlers' cabins and Apache camps alike. 5 settler families joined their cause, followed by 2 small bands of Vi, Apache, and even a group of Mexican ranchers who had suffered similar attacks. Their most significant breakthrough came when Captain Reynolds, an honest officer newly assigned to the territory, agreed to meet with them. Initially skeptical, his attitude shifted when presented with evidence of his predecessor's corruption. "I was sent to investigate rumors of military misconduct," he admitted, "but the depth of this conspiracy exceeds my expectations. These men dishonor the uniform." As spring flowers bloomed across the valley, this fragile alliance took form, different peoples united by the desire for justice and peaceful coexistence. Yet even as hope grew, scouts brought worrying news. The raiders had begun moving toward the canyon lands, their force now nearly 60 strong. "They come soon," Náshŭ told the council upon their return, "but we no longer stand alone." The canyon buzzed with preparations. Warriors crafted arrows and checked bowstrings. Women prepared medicine bundles and packed emergency supplies. Children and elders memorized escape routes to higher, more defensible positions. This would not be a simple raid, but a coordinated assault against a force that threatened their very existence. On the eve of the anticipated attack, the Allied forces gathered in the canyon. Apache warriors from 3 bands moved with silent efficiency alongside settler men who clutched rifles with grim determination. Captain Reynolds and his small contingent of loyal soldiers established defensive positions, while Mexican vaqueros, skilled with both rope and knife, scouted the approaches. At the center of this unprecedented gathering stood Elizabeth and Náshŭ, their union now a living symbol of the alliance they had forged. As darkness fell, Náshŭ withdrew to prepare for his role as war leader. When he returned, he carried a ceremonial staff that hadn't been seen by the tribe in generations. Battle staff stood taller than a man, crowned with eagle feathers and adorned with symbols of protection. Its surface recorded tribal victories dating back to his great-grandfather's time, each notch and painted mark representing a triumph against overwhelming odds. By tradition, only a war leader of proven vision could carry it into conflict. "My father's father carried this against Mexican soldiers," Náshŭ explained as the alliance leaders gathered around their campfire. "It has not been needed since I was a boy." Thomas Morgan studied the staff with respect. "Every culture has its talismans for courage," he observed. "We'll need all the strength we can muster tomorrow." Captain Reynolds unfolded a crude map of the surrounding terrain. "Our scouts report they'll approach from the South Valley, following the dry riverbed. Approximately 60 men, well armed but overconfident. They don't expect organized resistance. They believe they hunt scattered Apache families," Náshŭ added, "not an alliance of determined defenders." Together, they refined their strategy into the night. Elizabeth's knowledge of both Apache tactics and military thinking proved invaluable as they identified ambush points and escape routes. Her suggestion to use the settlers' wagons as both decoy and barricade was adopted enthusiastically. "We'll position them here," she indicated on the map, appearing vulnerable but actually funneling the raiders into this narrow passage where your warriors can attack from above. Dawn broke clear and cool. Elizabeth stood with Náshŭ at the canyon's highest vantage point, watching as their allies moved into position. The transformation in her life seemed impossible to comprehend, from Boston printer's daughter to frontier wife to Apache woman preparing for battle. "Are you afraid?" Náshŭ asked, the battle staff gripped firmly in his hand. "Yes," she admitted, "but not of dying. I fear failing those who have put their trust in us." He touched her face gently. "Whatever happens, you have already changed the course of many lives, mine most of all." The first warning came mid-morning, 3 short whistle blasts signaling the raiders' approach. Elizabeth took her position with Kiona and other women who would provide support and emergency medical care. Though tradition might have kept them from direct combat, necessity had overruled convention. The battle unfolded according to their plan, at least initially. The raiders, led by the man with the red bandana whom Elizabeth had wounded during the earlier attack, rode confidently toward what appeared to be an abandoned settler camp. Captain Reynolds and his men, dressed as civilians, played the role of frightened homesteaders retreating toward the canyon dot when the raiders pursued. They found themselves channeled between rock formations where Apache warriors rained arrows. From concealed positions above, the front riders fell immediately, creating chaos as horses reared and men shouted conflicting orders. Elizabeth watched from her elevated position as the carefully orchestrated ambush trapped the raiders in crossfire. The corrupt military officers who had joined the raiders were quickly identified by Captain Reynolds' men and targeted specifically, but battle plans rarely survive first contact. A group of raiders discovered a secondary path and threatened to outflank the defenders. Elizabeth spotted the danger before others and sounded the alarm. Náshŭ, battle staff raised high, led a group of warriors to intercept them. The fighting intensified as afternoon wore on. Elizabeth moved among the wounded, applying her hybrid medical knowledge to treat injuries. When a young Apache warrior fell near her position, she dragged him to safety under fire, earning fierce approval from tribal fighters who witnessed her courage. The tide turned when the man in the red bandana recognized Elizabeth among the defenders. His hatred focused his scattered forces, directing a concerted attack toward her position. Náshŭ intercepted him just as he reached the ridge where Elizabeth worked feverishly to save a wounded settler. The confrontation between Náshŭ and the man in the red bandana became the battle's turning point. As they fought hand-to-hand on the ridge, their struggle symbolized a larger conflict, the raider representing unchecked greed and violence, Náshŭ defending home and a fragile vision of coexistence. When Náshŭ's battle staff splintered under a vicious blow, Elizabeth feared the worst. But even as the raider raised his knife for a killing strike, Thomas Morgan's rifle cracked from below. The red bandana blossomed with a darker crimson as its wearer fell. The raiders, seeing their leader fall and facing unexpected unified resistance, broke ranks and fled, pursued by Apache riders and Captain Reynolds' men. By sunset, victory was clear but costly. 4 Apache warriors, 2 settlers, and 1 of Reynolds' soldiers had died. Many more suffered wounds of varying severity. The raider force had been decisively defeated, with over half their number captured or killed. Most importantly, documents found on the corrupt officers provided evidence of their criminal conspiracy, ensuring justice would continue beyond the battlefield. In the days that followed, the dead were honored according to their respective traditions. Apache warriors were placed in high rock crevices facing the rising sun. Settler dead were buried with Christian prayers. All were recognized as having fallen in a common cause that transcended their differences. As wounds healed and spring deepened toward summer, discussion turned to the future. Captain Reynolds, now the ranking military authority in the region, proposed an unprecedented arrangement. "This territory needs peace to prosper," he stated during a council meeting where all allied groups were represented. "The canyon lands will remain Apache territory, recognized by military decree. Settler communities will be established only in the valleys, with clear boundaries respected by all parties." Elizabeth and Náshŭ exchanged glances, recognizing the seeds of something extraordinary taking root. "And trade between our peoples?" Elizabeth asked. "Encouraged and protected," Reynolds confirmed. "In fact, I propose establishing a trading post at the junction of our territories, a neutral ground where all can come in peace." This vision quickly took tangible form. Near the valley entrance where the battle had occurred, construction began on a unique settlement. Unlike typical military forts or trading posts of the era, this structure incorporated elements from all the allied cultures' Apache building methods for summer shade and winter warmth, settler techniques for durability, Mexican courtyard designs for community gathering. The trading post became the physical manifestation of their bridge between worlds. Elizabeth and Náshŭ made their home there, maintaining their primary residence in the canyon, but spending significant time at the post, where Elizabeth's language skills and Náshŭ's respected status facilitated communication and fair exchange. 1 year after the battle, as summer reached its peak, the allied peoples gathered to celebrate both victory and new beginnings. Children from different backgrounds played together while adults traded goods and stories. Captain Reynolds, now promoted for his service, brought news that the territorial governor had officially recognized their unique arrangement. As twilight approached, Elizabeth and Náshŭ slipped away from the festivities, climbing to a mesa overlooking both the canyon and the valley beyond. The trading post stood at the junction, lanterns beginning to twinkle against the gathering dusk. "Did you ever imagine this?" Elizabeth asked, her hand resting on her swelling belly where their child grew, a new life that would embody the union of their worlds. "No," Náshŭ admitted, placing his hand over hers. "When I found you by the burned wagon, I thought only of saving one life. I did not see how that one life would change so many others." They watched as the first stars appeared above the desert landscape, the same stars their ancestors had interpreted differently, yet had looked to for the same guidance through darkness. "The path ahead will not be easy," Náshŭ continued. "There will always be those who fear what we have built here. But we have shown it is possible," Elizabeth replied. "That is something neither of our peoples can forget now." As full night embraced the land, they descended together toward the lights of the celebration. Behind them, the ancient canyon stood sentinel as it had for millennia. Before them stretched a future neither could have imagined. Alone, a future where a starving Apache had found a dying woman by the burned remains of her wagon, placed her in his saddle, and together they had forged a path towards something new. Beneath the endless western sky, 5 years later, a group of travelers passing through the territory would marvel at the thriving community where Apache, settler, and Mexican families lived in remarkable harmony. At its heart stood a school where children of all backgrounds learned each other's languages and traditions, taught by a woman with kind eyes who spoke of building bridges rather than walls, and a tall Apache man called He Who Sees the Hidden, who taught them to look beyond the visible world to the connections that bind all living things together.